Amen. You guys can return to your seats. Thanks for coming up. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eric. That is a great introduction to our talking about Jesus as the Good Shepherd, the shepherd who gives life. And as we talk about that today, we're looking at John chapter 10, the fourth Sunday after Easter. I don't know if you've ever clued into this, but every year, the fourth Sunday after Easter is called Good Shepherd Sunday. We have a passage from John chapter 10, either the beginning or the middle or later, where it talks about Jesus being our Good Shepherd. Jesus, in that discourse, makes some very bold claims about himself that might not come through to us, but definitely came through to the Jewish leaders who were looking to get rid of Jesus already at this point, the religious leaders of Jesus' day. He says, I am the gate to the sheep, he says first. I am. He echoes back to when Moses asked God, now if I go before Pharaoh, if I go to the people, who am I to say has sent me? I don't even know your name. And God said, here's my name. I am. Yahweh. I will be. I am. So when Jesus says, I am the gate for the sheep, he's also signifying that he is the Son of God, the one who has come in the flesh, God in the flesh. And then later Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. So we have today John chapter 10, the first 10 verses. And if you have a Bible with you, I invite you to take that out. If you happen to use your phone or tablet to follow along, I invite you to do that. Or you can use one of the Bibles in the pew rack in front of you. Please go ahead and do that. That will help you a little bit today. And I'm just going to cover first some of the content of what Jesus says. When I see in my mind Jesus talking about himself as the Good Shepherd, I kind of get this type of picture, like this stained glass window. Jesus holding the sheep. It's a very kind, gentle picture with Jesus comforting, keeping, and also blessing the sheep that he's holding. So today, as we take a look at John chapter 10, it speaks about Jesus being the Good Shepherd, and Jesus says it's only the shepherd who enters through the gate. Anyone else who tries to get in, they've got to be someone who's trying to do something not good with the sheep. Jesus also talks about the sheep. They listen to his voice. I was reading this week a book written by a shepherd, and that helped me a lot because I may have lived in Indiana, but I never took care of sheep or anything like that. And the shepherd who was writing this book, talking about Jesus as the Good Shepherd, he said, generally when a shepherd is approaching the sheep pen, they're humming, they're singing, they're doing something as they're coming along, and the sheep just notice, they know the shepherd's voice, and so the sheep know that the shepherd is coming. How do they know that? Well, they know that the shepherd does good things for them. He makes sure that they are cared for. He also leads them where they can find good pasture and leads them to where they can find still water that can be drank. The sheep listen to the shepherd's voice, and he calls his sheep by name. I once heard about a sermon that someone had preached, and they were preaching at someone's pastoral anniversary. Maybe it was their 25th anniversary in the ministry. And the person preaching said, speaking about the Good Shepherd, that a shepherd knows his sheep. He might know that this one's had a little frostbite on their ear, and so all the sheep might look the same to us. But the shepherd knows his sheep, and he knows them personally. He calls them by name. And so as Jesus is talking about himself as the Good Shepherd, he's also saying that he personally knows us, his people, the sheep of his pasture. And when they hear the shepherd's voice and the shepherd goes out, they follow him. Also in that book from the shepherd who is writing about Jesus, the Good Shepherd, he said a sheep pen is no place for sheep to be fed. While you might have a place where some animals are fed right where they live, the sheep, that's not a good place. So the shepherd leads them out so that they find that good pasture. And when the shepherd is leading them, they recognize his voice and they follow him. And then this I am statement of Jesus, where he says, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be kept safe. Will be kept safe. And here's where I want to pause for a second. The image that I've always had about the passages relating to the Good Shepherd, very docile, very, very nice, calming images. But did you catch to whom Jesus was directing these words initially? If you've got a Bible open, at the very beginning of chapter 10, Jesus says, very truly, I tell you, Pharisees. He's speaking these words to the Pharisees. And maybe that helps us a little bit with the context, especially when Jesus says, I am the gate of the sheep. All who've come before me have been thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. And then if we back up just a little bit, John chapter 9. I didn't realize until this year, John chapter 9 flowed right into John chapter 10. Those chapter headings, those were added much later, maybe around the 1300s. So Jesus is in the middle of a larger discourse, a larger event that's happening. See, in John chapter 9, Jesus healed a man who was born blind. And as that man is called to account, especially because Jesus healed on the Sabbath day, a day you're supposed to rest, this man is being accused of following Jesus. And they say, we know the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, those who are the religious leaders of Jesus' day. They say, we know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this man, we don't even know where he comes from, verse 29. And then the man who is healed of his blindness, he says, now that's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And then here's what the religious leaders say to the man who was born blind, now can see. They don't rejoice that God has done a miracle, but they say to this man, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. Essentially, they put him out of the church because Jesus healed him. A little bit later, Jesus sees this man, and this man sees Jesus for the first time, sees him with his own two eyes. And Jesus says, you have now seen the Son of Man. And he says, Lord, I believe. And he worships Jesus, this man who had been born blind. And then there were some Pharisees there tagging along, keeping an eye on Jesus. The Pharisees, they weren't always fair, you see. But if you think of that, that really captures their spirit. They've got standards for everybody else, and they're put up on such a pedestal, and yet they themselves are not the best people. And they certainly don't want Jesus messing with their system, how they've got things set up for themselves. And so those Pharisees are sitting there saying, what? Are you saying that we're blind? Are you saying that we don't know what we're talking about? They say that to Jesus. This is right before chapter 10. And Jesus said, if you were blind, like this man was, and you were healed, and you took in the healing of God in your heart, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim that you can see, your guilt remains. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter by the sheep pen, by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. Jesus, in today's language, he is calling those religious leaders out because they are not acting with grace, and they have rejected in their hearts the one whom God has sent, his only Son. Maybe to get an idea of this, I found a clip. I stumbled across it. I was scrolling this week a little bit, and this little clip perhaps gives us an idea of the force with which Jesus said these words. This is not the same event as John chapter 10. It comes from Matthew 23. And it is essentially about 6 months after this. You see, you can tell that things are building between Jesus and the religious leaders, the ones who would then arrest Jesus. They would convict Jesus in a midnight sham trial, turn Jesus over, and then advocate for Jesus to be executed, to be crucified. This clip comes from The Chosen.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, and you yourselves don't go in, but you don't let anyone else in either. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourself. Jesus!
That's
Stop
the
this at once.
Pharisees.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. For you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and
lawlessness. Hypocrisy and lawlessness. You get the force of Jesus' words there that he spoke during Holy Week against the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Jesus here, it gives you just a different perspective in John chapter 10, Jesus' tone. Why the tone? Why so forceful? It's because of what Jesus has come to do. He is the good shepherd, and the good shepherd will fiercely protect his sheep. Here's this man who was thrown out of the synagogue, who was born blind, who all his life has been lost, discarded, disregarded, could only beg and receive. Just like before God, we can only beg and receive in and of ourselves. Jesus heals that man. He comes to that man. He changes that man's life. And they're going to throw him out of the synagogue. Jesus steps forward and he says, I'm protecting my sheep. So fiercely would Jesus protect his sheep from any that would destroy them, that Jesus will put himself in harm's way. So in John chapter 10, Jesus speaks about the aims of the thief. The aim of the thief, he only comes to steal and to kill and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And then Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Maybe at that point, Jesus' tone is changing because he's speaking right into our hearts. That he is the one who lays down his life only to take it up again. And no one takes it from him, but he lays it down of his own accord. He has authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. He is risen for us in victory, and he defends us. He desires to be at work in us. So how are you doing at listening to the Good Shepherd? Listen for his voice. And I'll tell you what, if you really want to know what Jesus has to say, look in here, the scriptures. It's all about Jesus from cover to cover, ultimately talking about God's promise, God's promised one, and then Jesus comes on the scene, the Son of God. And then all else after that, after the Gospels, talks about what it means to be a follower of Jesus and listening to his voice. Will you follow where he leads? Ultimately, where he leads takes us to the cross. where we lay down our lives, our sinful selves, our own desires, so that we might serve others, so that we might go to the people who are marginalized just like Jesus did, so that we might give of our whole self as representatives of Jesus, as those he has called by name. For he is our good shepherd, the one who lays down his life for the sheep, but who rises in victory. And so we say, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. Please rise as together we sing.